on. Hello, everybody. Richard Tromans here from Artificial Lawyer. Today we are having a very special Law Tech Live event, which is going out live on this platform and also live right across LinkedIn. Nick's joining us. Good you could join us, Nick. So what we're going to do today is we've got about an hour or so. We'll hopefully have some Q&A. But we're going to start off with not necessarily sort of firm predictions, but talking about key trends and the things that we think that you should be looking at across 2022. But enough about me and what we're going to be talking about. Let's go back to the panel and let me allow each of them to introduce themselves. So Emma, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Emma Jackson. I'm the Client Innovation Manager at Mills & Reeve. I've been with them for 16 years, but not always doing innovation because it didn't exist back then. But I've been doing it for the last few years and I'm the manager there now.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. John?
I'm Jon Bartman. I'm the head of Jameson Legal Tech, which is a legal tech consultancy and consortium of innovative legal tech solutions. We service law firms of all sizes, in-house teams of all sizes that are looking for a digital transformation, but often don't know where to start. We also offer full recruitment services to legal tech solution providers and to the whole legal fraternity.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Isabel.
Hi, hello everybody in the ether. So I'm Isabel Parker and I am currently the Executive Director of the Digital Legal Exchange, which is a not-for-profit organisation that works with corporate legal teams to accelerate their digital transformations. And before that, I was the Chief Legal Innovation Officer at Freshfields for a bunch of years. And before that, I was a lawyer at Freshfields for a bunch of years.
Fantastic. Awesome. Right. Well, let's get cracking because we've only got about an hour or so. So we're going to start off with some key thoughts from each of the panel. And these thoughts are mostly directed at what are the major themes, what are the key things that people should be focusing on this year in 2022. So we'll start as we started before with Emma. What do you think that people in the legal and legal tech world should really be focusing on, and what do you think they will be focusing on?
So from our side of things, so obviously I'm in a law firm, I'm not at a legal technology company. We're looking at data and integrations quite heavily. So everything that we want now needs to integrate with other things, so that we're trying to get rid of as many sort of data silos as we can. But we're also really focusing on AI and contract review in particular. So we've been looking at AI tools for years now, but it's always been a bit of a dark art, a bit of a mystery. No one's really known the right questions to ask, whereas I feel like we've actually really turned a corner with that now. And it is going to be something that is prominent, particularly in my world, in the next 12 months.
Got you. Well, okay. Well, let's just expand on that just a little bit. I remember before we came on this call, you were saying that initially, the first wave of legal AI, if you want to call it that, kind of swept across the firm and didn't really leave much of an impact. But now it's much more real. Why is that? Why do you think this is happening now and at your firm?
Mainly because of the last 2 years. So everybody's been working in a very different way. In many ways, we've come on leaps and bounds. But in other ways, everybody is quite tired now. And I think when we get these problems, there's less of the lawyer to throw at the problem. So everybody's at a real risk of sort of burnout. So any kind of technology where we can improve efficiencies and give people a little bit of something back, mainly time, is going to make a real impact. It's something that we're working on right now. It's a real thing. Yes, Isabel.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Do you mind, Richard? I don't want to jump into.
No, please. No, it's a free for all. Go for it.
So that's really great to hear, Emma, that you're sort of thinking about this really seriously now. My question would be, with all your associates, as we hear in the press, like crazy busy, these M&A deals going crazy, how are you going to train your algorithms? Who's going to do that work? Because historically that's been a sort of an associate's job in many cases. How are you going to handle that then?
It has, yeah. So a lot of that is going to come down to our team. So I know this is another thing. So 3 years ago, when we first started looking at it, we were a team of 1, which was me, and now we're a team of 10. We do have some qualified lawyers in the team, but a lot are technologists, to be honest. But it's going to be us, and it will also be some lawyers. So it'll be key people. We have innovation champions dotted around the entire business. There's over 40 of them. So in each service line, we've got a core group of people that we can call on when we need these things. And it's actually everybody in the business has being innovative as an objective. It's part of sort of how we measure people. Mm-hmm. So they do actually, there's a desire for people to get involved, and we do sort of allow them that amount of time. Some of the big projects, obviously, it can take quite a few people, and it can take quite a lot of time. Training all of the algorithms, which is partly why it was a bit of a non-starter when we've looked at it previously, but it is now something that we've got to do it. So we are getting on with it, but it will be a lot of it will be our team. Not all me though, which is good.
Well, I think you bring up something really interesting there, actually, because obviously you have the ability to bring on tech. And what I think hopefully is going to happen in the next 12 months is that the tech is moving fast forward over the last few years and getting better and better and easier to implement. And it's not the playground of the bigger firms anymore. And I do hope that over the next 12 months, the small and mid-sized firm, and certainly the in-house teams, will be able to adopt technology in an easier way. And I think that that's something that is a real improvement in the tech providers themselves. And certainly the people that we work with are very happy to implement technology with teams of 20 and 30, and making it easy for them to do so, both on budget and the way that they're doing it. So I hope that that's a key trend that continues throughout, that it's not just the playground of big law and actually opens up to everybody.
I hope so too, but just looking, we were talking about this before this webinar started, the TR, what's it called? Report on the state of the legal market that came out recently with Georgetown University has a really interesting table in there. It's called the popularity sort of gap. And it's a visualization of what lawyers want to spend their time doing. And right at the top, the big popular stuff, unsurprisingly, is everything that relates to billable hours or client relationships. And right down in the bottom left-hand quadrant is all the stuff that we're talking about. So alternative delivery models, innovation, diversity. I mean, that's just a strange one to be down there for sure. So I wonder, especially as everybody is so busy, there's this febrile market out there. Associates are working very hard. How are people going to find the time to really get adoption of these kind of tech, legal tech systems and tools, and really embed them into the
only way to do it successfully is to reduce targets for people who are involved in it. I'm not saying that we've done that, because we haven't as of yet, but we do allow people. So we've got different, when you record time, there's different options, and some of them are matter, some of them are non-matter, some of them are non-matter valuable, and that's where the innovation codes all sit. So it is still taken into account as valuable time, even though it isn't chargeable. And that's a real driver. And also it's in performance reviews. Everybody has to evidence that they've worked innovatively in some way throughout the year. So the fact that they have to evidence it means that we then get calls saying, how can I be involved? Whereas previously we wouldn't have had those calls. So that's relatively new. That's only been the last 18 months that's been in there for the lawyer teams. But it does actually make a big difference and help with the engagement, because the engagement's the hardest thing. I mean, if everybody used the technology that they had available, I don't think we'd have any of the issues that we've got or that anyone's got in the sort of area. But it is engaging people, and a prime example is I used to do quite a lot of training. I was showing somebody, went up to one of our offices to run a session on redaction in PDFs, and somebody didn't turn up. They didn't turn up because they were stood at a photocopier with a Sharpie redacting things. And I was like, if you'd given the hour, you'd have saved yourself 8. So it is actually making sure that people have got the time to learn how to use the technologies that will make them more efficient.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I also think that involving them early on in the process as well is really important so that they have buy-in. None of these solutions should be like vanity solutions and just look good but don't do a job. The idea behind all of this tech, as Emma said, you know, if everyone used the tech that was just there, you probably wouldn't have any issues. The problem is they don't use the tech because it's not been integrated well to the team, or they don't feel part of the process. And I think if you can involve them at an early stage, you kind of get the buy-in that this is going to save me time, effort, and ultimately money. And I think that's going to be really important.
I really agree with that, John. And what we did when I was at Freshfields was certainly for our client-facing digital products, so actually developing stuff to commercialize. We'd have our associates as product owners, so they had proper skin in the game. So they couldn't just chuck a solution over the fence and then walk away. They'd have to like live with it throughout the whole product life cycle, including when to retire it. I'm not saying that was a very easy thing to implement, but it certainly was successful. And I've seen that trend now continue since I've left the law firm world. I think Linklaters have recently, one of their associates has moved into a product ownership role within what wasn't a coder, with Shilpa's team. So I think we're seeing more and more of that as well. Proper skin in the game.
No, indeed. Well, just a side question. There's actually a question coming through already, but I'll just ask that quick point about innovation hours. People have different brands terms for it, but I mean, does that work? To do innovation hours work? I mean, I think it was Reed Smith and a couple of other firms who started that a few years ago. More firms have taken that on. Does it work to sort of say, hey, you've got 10 hours a year to do innovation? Or I don't know.
I think it does to a point, in that it gets it at the front and center, and some people will only want to do that much because that's all that's required of them. But then you have got we've got a really cool set of lawyers. There are innovation champions, and they're actually given 100 hours a year, and they can get involved in bigger projects, and that's where it really makes an impact. We do have some products. We've held a few internal hackathons, and the winning idea of the last one that we did was a product. I worked with them to create that product, but then it's really the core team. So there were 6 people from dotted all around the business, and they actually came up with it. So they do feel a certain amount of ownership to that product, and that really helps. Especially with sort of marketing it and talking to the rest of the business, they really do champion it because it's, you know, they came up with it in 24 hours. It's their baby. I just made it out of technology.
Well, let me just bring in that question, and then we'll go on to this, to John's thoughts for what we should all be focusing on. And I'm just going to abbreviate the question quite a lot, but basically, I think the key point here is there's basically too many solutions. There's too much going on, to put it simply. There's too many different products. There's too many products, I guess. There was a really interesting point that was made by Tara Waters in an article that I did a while ago about legal tech orphans, about legal tech that's been bought over many years, and like no one loves it, and it's just sitting there in the back, and like it's never used. So you've got those, and then you've got, you know, various partners and different departments all playing with different things. And I guess you've got the legal tech team, innovation team, bringing in tech to do pilots. And how do you actually turn all of that into a coherent strategy?
Can I take that one?
Yeah, well, you can both. You can all do
it. So I think there's a really strong business case to be made around simplification and convergence. So looking at how platforms can serve multiple areas, and you can actually, if you're decommissioning things people aren't using, you save money. And saving money gives you a business case to buy platforms that actually work and that you can spread across all practice groups, well, not all, but many practice groups. So I would say, if you're thinking about it strategically, have a principle of simplification, principle of convergence, build your business case around that. And you know, that's a no-brainer. It will get support from your CFO, it'll get support from the board, and you know, it just makes sense.
But who manages the convergence? So I suppose it's like, I mean, convergence is something people used to talk about in relation to the growth of panels, when panels were a new thing 20 years ago, and GCs were in charge of, you know, that panel creation. and making sure that there were less and less and less
Yeah.
firms on it. Is that the head of, I don't know, head of innovation, if such a role exists at your firm?
Depends how you structured, it depends on the capabilities of the individuals. I certainly couldn't have done it as head of innovation. And in our case, Professionals, it was our chief digital and technology officer as part of a broader digital transformation strategy. Because I think it's like a proper techie's job. It's not like I'm not saying there are no innovators that are technologists, proper technologists, full technologists. But I think it is a fundamental part of a digital transformation strategy. And it's really more on the IT side than necessarily the lawyer innovation side. But, that's just my view.
I agree, but as soon as you move sort of, again, I'm talking about moving down tiers in terms of, some law firms don't have innovation managers, but still have a need for a digital transformation. And at that stage, it's having a steering committee, it's having 2 or 3 lawyers, it's having IT involved during that to really build a base, but then involving other people where it becomes necessary. So if it's a firm-wide initiative, then it has to have a few other people involved. If it's just a litigation team, then you need to get those litigation partners involved in this process. And I think that, once you start chatting it out and you start scoping it out and you start understanding how it's going to move forward, you should be in a better position to make that decision. Law firms are notoriously difficult to make decisions because it's ruled by committee. So it's committee to committee to committee. And there has to be a way to make sure that it's working for every part of the law firm, and then trying to break down those committees to make a decision that much quicker.
It raises one thought, which I've seen over the last few years, which is initially tech was the reserve of the traditional IT team. And then, what I call like the new wave of legal tech arrived 2015, 2016. And then suddenly you had innovation teams, and the idea was to get all the lawyers involved. And it's like, have we kind of reached, a high watermark, and that there's only going to be ever so many lawyers at law firms who actually get involved in this stuff? In fact, could it even reverse and go the other way? And then actually the lawyers will play with tech and go, look, hold on, you know what? We've wasted a ton of time on this. You're a professional. You do this 24 hours a day. You do it. We're going to give it back to you. I don't know which way it will go.
It depends from my point of view. We do have some lawyers who love the technology and want to get involved, and some of them are secret bedroom coders, I'm sure. And they're actually quite happy to do that. But there's also a set of people who've got the ideas, but actually they went to law school to do law. They didn't go to law school to do technology. And they are actually quite happy to pass that over to our team. So I'm one of those, well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm one of those strange people. I was actually in IT for 10 years I did service desk, second line, I was the IT trainer, I did all of that. And then I was doing more and more projects. And because of my technical background, I got the AIs, the automations, the whizzy ones. And I was an innovation champion, and it merged, and that's where the role came from. And that's gone in the last 3 years. It's gone from just me to a team of 10. So there are people in the business who they're all internal hires, apart from some trainees that we've taken in. But there are people in the business who really want to get involved in this. And actually, we're a door to that for them, so that they can still be involved in the law, but they can also do the technology. And they are what helps us. Your previous question about sort of the volume of solutions, there are tons. There really are across the business in different areas. We've got litigation tools. We've got, there's about 30 or 40 that I can think of off the top of my head. But what we've done is we've brought it all together in an innovation app. So it's called What the Tech, which I do have to be quite careful saying.
Very good.
It's pretty good. And it's basically a decision tree. So it asks them a lot of questions, and it takes them through to the right technology. It gives them a techspert, which sometimes is me and sometimes is somebody else in the team, or it might be a lawyer.
Did you say techspert?
I did say a techspert.
So many puns in this.
I'm honestly, you can tell some of these came up after a glass of wine, can't you? But we've got techsperts for each application, but there's also client flyers in there. There's testimonials from clients who've used it, and it does really sort of help guide people to the right technology instead of them. It's basically all of the questions that they used to ask me, But it's just so that they can get to it in their pocket, really, rather than actually having to have a conversation with somebody in our team to get the answer for what's our automation solution.
Well, let's press on, because amazingly we've burned through 20 minutes already. We've got a couple of interesting questions in addition, but we'll come back to those later. Jon, do you want to have a go? What do you think everyone should be thinking about this year, and what are your tech trends?
Well, I've kind of already said it, but I want to see better and quicker adoption of tech. I agree with Emma. The last 2 years has given us this unique situation. I know as of today, back in the UK, we're meant to be going back into the office, but I think that there will be a hybrid that's come out of this, where people can happily work from home and work from the office. So it means that tech has to move forward quicker, and I would hope that the adoption route will move that much quicker, and mean that great solutions actually end up in the right places and being used to save time, and that's the thing that lawyers crave the most, which is I need more time in my day, and technology should be that driver.
That raises some interesting points, doesn't it? Which if you read Artificial Lawyer regularly, you'll probably guess what I'm going to say next, which is the obviously inefficiency, obviously not intentionally, is the deliverer of great golden nuggets in the shape of profits. And having lots of time on your hand is wonderful, but you want billable time on your hands, don't you?
Yeah, that's the idea. Lawyers to do more legal work and to do less tech work. And I apologize there, Emma. But it is that crucial part of the day, and that's the same in-house teams as well as for law firms, which is I need to organize and free up time that I can be doing more legal work, and that's what everyone is striving for, and that's what these tech solutions, wherever they may be, and it's amazing. Emma's got 30 running, and there's probably 600, 700, 800, 1,000 others out there that can probably aid and help, but it's finding the right ones that are right for the firm or the in-house team.
Any comments on that, Emma, Isabel?
I agree, really. It is trying to adopt things quickly and easily is a challenge, but it is going that way. I think more and more of the technologies that I'm seeing, implementation looks a lot smoother than some of the previous experiences I've had.
I mean, bringing this back, I guess, to some of the core themes such as prediction and what are the trends we're facing. I mean, bringing it back to that point. I mean, do you feel that we are seeing a trend towards easier implementation? For example, the rise of no code, where someone who literally even someone like me who can barely use a video recorder could actually build something. Is that the way it's going? Refers to something we might talk about later: productization, building little apps that you can immediately, once you've done a security check and so forth and added a bit of logo and so forth, you can then spin it out and get the clients to use it. I mean, is that like a trend that we're going to see grow and grow?
Definitely. So I think our the tech app that we built, we turned that around in a fortnight without any help from any developers from our development team, but it was built in the innovation team by a trainee who'd been with us for 2 months. And she built it in a fortnight, and it was rolled out at the partner day exactly 2 weeks after we decided to make it. So it's definitely achievable, and that was just a low-code app building software. Really easy, quite straightforward. There were a few bits of code, but nothing that we couldn't figure out together. And it's been great, and it's used every day by lots of people in the business. So I think that is the way it's headed. I think that is definitely a sort of trend that's coming, and it's easy to turn around. It's easy to fail fast. It's not had a massive investment. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, we turn it off.
Certainly for corporate legal teams, the ones that I'm speaking to, lots of them are I mean, you only have to look at the success of Brighter, for example, as a low-code platform, which is expanding like everywhere, has done phenomenally well. Clearly, they're onto something, and I think a lot of corporate legal teams are using these low-code platforms or no-code platforms for self-service or partial self-service. So that's certainly a trend that's extending into corporate legal as well. So I think it will continue, but for big, complex projects, it's not the right tool for that kind of job. If you're trying to build a digital front door or a platform, you're going to have to look elsewhere, I think, and then you do need to bring in some serious digital capabilities from outside the legal world to get that work done.
No, indeed. Well, let's go to you, Isabel. Let's continue with you. So what key trends do you think we'll be focusing on this year?
Well, I'd like to come at it from the sort of law firm client perspective, the corporate legal perspective, because that's the world I'm sort of operating in now, just to give a bit of a counterpoint. And I mean, there's a number of different sort of themes, and hopefully they bleed also into the law firms as well. But one of them is, of course, all corporate legal teams are looking for more value, and there's nothing new there. That's not predictive of 2022. It was ever thus. Less money, more with less, all of that sort of thing. But given where we are, and given the sort of the fact that a number of law companies or alternative legal service providers are now sort of gaining ground, becoming more digital, and also getting their operating licenses for the US and the UK, I think this 2022 could be the year of the ALSP, the successful ALSP, because as corporate legal teams become under more pressure, I think there's going to be more managed services deals, so the sort of more commoditized work will be outsourced. And law firms don't have the scale for that, they don't have the technology for that, so that's not something necessarily, well, not all of them do, maybe some of them, not many, that's not an area that they can operate. So I think a really good digital ALSP could really steal a march on 2022, potentially. Another one on the theme of what corporate clients are looking for, CLM, obviously, it continues to be a very, very high priority for corporate legal teams, and we've seen in the news that there are some sort of large-scale providers that aren't perhaps delivering the ROI that. You
mean Icertis?
Well, I don't know any names, Richard, but that's
those are all allegations, I should say. Those are all allegations.
Exactly. And it's not just Icertis stuff, but I have heard anecdotally that lots of corporate legal teams are finding that it's quite difficult to get the ROI out of these large platforms, not because they're not good platforms, but because they're just very complex. They do a lot of stuff that maybe they don't really need. So I suspect what's going to happen there, well, I think there will be some consolidation in that space, potentially.
In the CLM space?
Yeah, I think there might be some consolidation there. And I think we'll see the emergence of one or two really, really strong providers. And I think I know which ones I'd have my money on, but I'm not going to name them, who really commit to customer success. If you invest in that space, I think you could see one very, very strong or two very strong providers really stealing the market, not necessarily the ones you might think. That's my other prediction. ESG, I think, is a huge area of concern for corporate legal teams. The regulatory and disclosure obligations are just mounting all the time, and that's really a data issue. And I think corporate legal teams are going to need help with that. So I would like to see, and I expect to see, and there may already be out there, technology that will address and help with that effort. How you manage, track, implement, report on compliance with your ESG obligations. That would be an interesting one to look at.
Well, let me stop you there, because there's three. Yeah. They're all very, very rich themes of discussion. Let's start off with the ALSPs and your company. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know the acronym, that stands for Alternative Legal Service Provider, ALSP. Law company is a variation on ALSP for those organizations that don't like to be seen as alternatives. And these are organizations that may cover a huge breadth, really, that they could include regulated legal services, process level services, e-discovery. They may build and provide their own tech and tech consulting, legal ops. I mean, they're huge, broad churches. The only thing they probably don't do is probably super high level, super complex advisory work, which you might find in a large law firm. But other than that, they're pretty similar, which brings me to the question, and be open to all. I mean, a lot of research has shown actually that big law firms have a sort of symbiotic relationship, both with the ALSPs and the Big Four, and that despite a lot of press headlines in certain press that, it's like the Big Four are coming, or the ALSP are coming to eat our lunch, that actually they're actually a lot closer, and that some of the bigger law firms, like say take Norton Rose, is building effectively its own ALSP. So it's almost like there's a kind of convergence that like we're all like everyone's heading towards the same center of gravity. I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, yes and no, I would say. There's certainly some truth in that. There are law firms who are building very strong propositions. I don't think there are many with the scale and the capabilities to really compete with a very effective ALSP. They're two different beasts, in my opinion. So I feel that there is a real space for a highly digital ALSP with the right capabilities and people to really steal a march on the market, because they are more digital, they're more diverse in the way they operate, they are better value for money in many cases. They are really, and I've seen this firsthand, they're like super gritty and hungry, and they're sales engines. They're not like law firms. Law firms don't have sales engines in the same way. I never knew that before I left a law firm. But these guys are seriously organized and hungry and ready to compete for the work.
So from your point of view, they are a threat. Then they are.
I think they are a threat. They never. Well, I wouldn't say never, but currently they're certainly not equipped to take on the very high value, extremely complex cross-border deals. But there's less and less of that work going around for fewer and fewer people. More are competing for that kind of work. Is what I'm trying to say. So, but to be able to service large swathes of the more commoditized work under multi-year, multi-million managed services deals is extremely lucrative for alternative legal service providers, which allows them to invest in their proposition. So I do see them as a threat, and some will partner with law firms, but I think. I wouldn't do ALSPs a disservice. I think they hold their own against some of the very best.
Well, Emma, as someone who actually works at a law firm at present, I mean, what's your interactions with ALSPs and like?
So we
do you take any tech or tech services, for example, or sort of co-projects on things with them, or?
We haven't done as of yet. I mean, there may be some pieces of the business, but not in my world. It's not to say that we wouldn't, but it's also, I mean, we do come up against them on pitches and tenders and things like that, and it does really. I think more and more now you do have to be tech enabled in order to compete for some of these, in order to actually be at the table. Whereas that's sort of been the big turning point, is the fact that it is actually recognised now. So I mean, myself and a few members of the team, we do actually attend quite a lot of tenders and pitches, and we do get involved in that side of it now, whereas a few years ago that wouldn't have happened. But actually, so many things are coming through now, and they do want a tech first delivery, and we are doing a lot of legal process design around that, and actually winning work based on the fact that it's a technology led approach. So it is changing, but we've lost one.
He's died.
It's gone. Oh, it's back.
It's like ALSPs.
Yeah, it's gone. So there is a sort of change in the tide, but it is it's something that, the work that we're bidding for at the moment, we are able to compete on. So
gotcha. It's interesting that we started off talking about LSPs and we ended up back on tech again.
We did.
which is interesting. All roads lead back to tech, because I guess all roads lead back to legal data as the base layer of everything. So let me just bring in a question, actually, because there was a good question from Jonathan. Who says, this was an interesting one, actually, and I think it keeps evolving. When a law firm, or ALSP for that matter, is using a tech tool for a client, how does that get worked into the bill? Is it kind of invisible, and they just get the bill, and they don't even mention the tech? Do they say, we use this tech, and that's an extra £10,000, please? How does that work out?
So for us, it depends on the technology, and it depends on whether or not it's something that we would see as part of our infrastructure, or if it's something that we've had to purchase in for a particular deal, in which case it'd usually be agreed up front. So we do charge for some technologies, but we don't charge for all of them. I think some of them are becoming more and more just how you deliver work, and some of them are different. And actually, if we've had to build something for a particular transaction, then that is chargeable. It's not. So my team would then charge for our time in actually building that solution.
So
Sometimes that would be
you charge billable time.
sometimes, yeah, not on everything, but for some of the things that we do, yeah, some of the build times.
And you charge by time.
Yeah, well, half day. I haven't brought myself to face 6-minute units of my life yet, but by the half day, yeah.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And Isabel, when you were back at Freshfields, without breaching any secrecy, I mean, how did you charge out? I mean, you were obviously heavily involved in tech as co-head of innovation.
Yeah.
How did you handle that?
Well, ours were more client-facing digital products that we had developed specifically to meet a client need. So that was a sort of commercial model. So yes, generally we would charge, although there are some cases where what we would be developing was more relationship enhancing than anything else, in which case you'd give it for free anyway. And actually the biggest risk is that partners often just want to give stuff away for free because they see it as a sunk cost once it's developed. You know, the IT team's done it, it's done. Now I want to give it to my, my key client for free. So that was more the challenge than anything else. But just as Emma said, it depends on the tech. Some things are hygiene factor now. You just couldn't get away with charging for them, just like you couldn't get away with charging for Word, and other things which are relationship enhancing, you might want to give away for BD purposes, and other things that are built to be revenue generating, obviously you charge for. But again, never easy to work out how to price those offerings, although I'm sure it's come on a lot in the 2 years I haven't been there, but yeah.
Yeah, no, interesting. No, I remember when the first sort of AI doc review companies started getting sort of more popular, and there was a big debate about how that would be charged out. Does the client say, well, actually, I want to use Kia or Luminance, and the law firm says, well, okay, we can use it, but we're going to charge you a special rate for it because, frankly, we'd rather be doing the billable hour on you. Or we'll have to create a new type of billable hour because we're actually working at a different rate now.
And I think that's the interesting bit there, Richard, which is that it will have to evolve. And the way that technology should really be enhancing your proposition rather than also, it being client-led. I want to use Kira, for example, but it really should be that the law firm is pushing the boundaries in terms of what they're offering to their client to make life easier, rather than sort of always going back to a billable hour or something I can charge back to you because X, Y, and Z. It should be, I'm doing this because it's going to make your life easier. And that's what, when we break it down, that's what tech should be internally as well as externally, which is making everyone's lives easier.
Yeah, and if you've brought in a tool to make your team more efficient, arguably, why would you be charging a client for that? I mean, what you should do is I know you'll like this, which is it should be a fixed price, and then any efficiency gain that you manage, is for the firm to claim. But certainly to charge your clients effectively for your inefficiency is, that's just not right.
Well, you're charging the client for your inefficiency and introducing efficiency.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we love efficiency, but we're just not very good at it, so we'll charge you for it. But changing tack. Well, let's go to ESG because that I think is definitely topical. I mean, that I think hit my radar about the middle of last year. People started saying, a very well-known GC of a very large company contacted me and said, "Have you heard of any legal tech companies that do ESG?" And at that point, I said, "No, I've never heard of a single one." Then I started hearing about some of the large city firms building their own ESG tools. Isabel, you just want to go back to that point and for people who are not sort of super clued into the whole ESG thing, what is it? Why does it matter? How does that connect to legal tech?
Well, it stands for environmental, social, and governance, and it's an obligation on all corporations. Well, not necessarily a legal obligation, although there are some European law obligations, but a sort of stakeholder obligation to run your business or your corporation in a way that is climate sensitive, that takes into account all the stakeholders that you might come into contact with, rather than just your shareholders. The whole concept of stakeholder capitalism, rather than the purpose of a corporation just being to make money. And the reason that's sort of come to the fore is that in, I think it was 2019, the Business Roundtable, which is a sort of US corporate sort of community signed a letter that said we no longer subscribe to the purpose of the corporation being just for our shareholders. It's now for the broader stakeholders out there. So that's your supply chain. It's the wider world. It's everybody who sort of touches your product. And for various reasons, some of them legislative or regulatory, and some of them simply because your reputation as a corporation can be broken in a single tweet. Corporations are very keen to make sure that they are reporting, implementing, tracking their compliance with all these various regulations, be they soft regulations or hard regulations. And that's a huge regulatory burden. Doesn't necessarily fall just to the legal function, but a good proportion of it does. And how do corporate legal teams manage that? How do they track it? How can they be sure that they are complying? Because there'll come a time when they'll start to have to disclose this in their annual reports, and obviously the consequences of disclosing wrongly or not disclosing are very, very serious. So what technology is out there to assist with that? And lots of corporate legal teams are asking that question. I hope that's a bit garbled, but you know what I'm getting at.
Totally. And Emma, again, as you're our guinea pig. You're the person who actually lives inside a law firm. So you're seeing it for real. Are people talking about ESG? I was on a chat very similar to this a couple of weeks ago, and someone jumped on at the end and said, "Oh, it's all rubbish. No one cares about ESG."
I disagree with that.
People actually didn't reflect what people were telling me. But what have you?
Yeah, so we definitely ESG is front and center at the moment. We've newly appointed head of ESG, who's was a partner who's moved over with a passion. And we've actually just appointed a sustainability manager who starts next Wednesday, I think, which is great. One of our trainees has been involved in the ESG project from the beginning. And it is something that, I feel quite passionately about it as well, to be honest, especially given the last 2 years. There's been a great environmental impact of all the lockdowns. They've not been ideal, don't get me wrong, but there's been a lot less printing, there's been a lot less travel, there's been a lot less things around that. And I think that's something that I'd be really keen for any business to try and keep hold of, the really good bits that have been actually beneficial, because so much of it has been really hard, that actually the difference. So just because we're going back to the offices, do we still need to print everything when we haven't printed it at home? That kind of thing will make a big difference. We haven't been asked to build any ESG tech yet, but I'm sure that will be in the pipeline in due course once the new team have got settled in.
Actually, just interest on the paper thing I know I know in certain American states, some things actually literally legally have to be on a piece of paper. There's very few of them. Is there anything? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I mean, are there any things in England and Wales where you literally have to print it out?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer either. I'm sure there's some, but
I don't know. Isabel, you must have been told what.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I think the sort of bigger question is that ESG isn't just about sort of law firms' individuals' carbon footprints, important as that is. I'm not in any way saying that that's not an important thing and people aren't doing great work there, but
no, I completely agree.
Law firms are suppliers. They're part of the supply chain. They supply to corporates. Corporates have to be sure that their suppliers are behaving in an ethical way. It could even come down to corporates saying, I won't hire whoever it may be because they've represented this tobacco company and we believe that to be unethical. So it could have very profound implications for law firms over time, not just in who they represent, but also in terms of diversity and inclusion, which has obviously been a front and center of law firms and the client dynamic for quite a long time. Yeah, so it goes beyond just being responsible law firm citizens to really, how you are perceived in the market and how your clients perceive you.
Interesting. John, any thoughts on that?
No, I think this is something that is going to be a major talking point throughout the next 12 months. There's no denying that we've moved on very slowly and very in a small way in the last couple of years. But I think I completely agree with Isabel that there will be a number of tech solutions that will start looking at this as well to bring it back to tech. and to monitor and maintain the ethical, and that whether with that, of larger corporations especially, but that also will filter down through to law firms and the way that they're dealing with clients and employees and everybody else around.
Here's a out there thought for you. I have to do my notes for this, but I was speaking with another large not-for-profit association that we work with, the Digital Legal Exchange, and they've been working with the European Commission, exploring using blockchain as the vehicle for consolidating and gathering data and reporting for ESG, which would mean that reporting would be done not on a sort of individual corporate level, but a sort of state level or a regional level, which obviously has a sort of very profound implications for how commercial deals would be done. So I know how much you love these sort of futuristic visions, Richard. So who knows? We'll use blockchain.
Well, let's stay with that. Okay, I'm going to throw a few googlies now, to use a cricketing analogy. Let's do the metaverse, because I'll be honest, I'm fairly cynical about it. I don't particularly like Facebook, even though I use it. Pretty much like everybody. I hate it, but I use it. Sorry, GC of Facebook. It's going to be sorry about that. But we can talk about that later. Is metaverse gonna pick up? Will we actually see law firms doing a kind of Second Life experience? There'll be all these partners walking around the office banging into walls with these like headsets, like blonk,
I hope so.
But I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because it's really weird. I mean, like talking about it right now, it just seems absurd and just completely silly. Like this is never going to happen. And then you go onto like Forbes magazine or something, and you're like, they're taking it absolutely dead seriously. I must admit, I don't know.
I think it will happen. It will happen. Sorry, John, to jump in there. It will happen, and I think in very small ways, there's been sort of experiments going on outside of the metaverse. For example, one of our members at the Digital Legal Exchange, Hewlett Packard, their legal team, so they're a really cool and progressive legal team, have been experimenting with virtual reality for all the way through the pandemic, and they've developed a sort of virtual reality as a service sort of proposition that they've developed themselves. They've sold into the rest of HPE, and they're going to commercialize more broadly. And the concept was that they found it much easier to meet through this virtual world, to actually see each other, to do virtual whiteboarding sessions together. And according to them, it's been incredibly successful for a global technology organization. So in small ways, it's already happening. I suppose the bigger issue from a legal perspective is the sort of ethics, the data ethics elements that it throws up, and that's a whole very specialized area of law. But I imagine there'll be plenty of advisory work for law firms in that space.
I mean, would you trust Facebook, which has been found out again and again to be economical with what they disclose? I mean, holding a meeting about an M&A deal over,
I'll jump in here and say to you, if we sat here five years ago and say that, what, we would do most of our M&A deals on Zoom, and we wouldn't be in a boardroom signing loads of papers, and actually we'd do it on DocuSign. And I don't need to have all of that stuff in front of me because I've got an amazing document editor program. I've got, my contracts are built with an amazing clause library that have been, all of these things are, the evolution of the process. And essentially the metaverse, it might not be there just yet. I completely agree, but we're moving towards it. I mean, there's no doubt about it that, I'm having conversations with people in Australia, which, happen over Zoom, and we're closing deals over, Teams, and we're moving towards a metaverse.
But John, let me just because we're running out of time. As you were saying, like Zoom, DocuSign, or there are other e-signature providers.
Yeah, sorry.
That indeed works, and you get a nice VDR, etc., and you get like a deal tool to help you, etc. That all works. So what on earth do we need to put on silly headsets and walk around the office bumping into things? I mean, if you just almost said we don't need it.
I think as that technology gets a little bit better, so the actual use of it. At the moment, you're walking into walls and you're bashing yourself, but it will get better. The tech will improve, and you won't be bashing your head against anything, but you will be feeling more in the presence of people by adopting the technology.
Yeah.
So I think it could go some way towards hybrid, where you've got some people in the office and some people hologram type, VR, they're there, but they're not there. But I think it's still a bit of a way off. But then 2 years ago, I wouldn't have believed that I could do all my job from sat in my house. And we've done that for 2 years, and it's actually worked really well. And I can attend 5 client meetings in a day at different ends of the country, whereas previously I'd have spent quite a bit of time in the car. And that's not. So, I mean, we've come on so far in 2 years. There's nothing to say that in another 2 years we can't have gone that far again, really, and it'd be different.
So it's all. So I suppose. There's just a comment here about the meta is much bigger than just that. But I suppose, fundamentally, what we're talking about, just to bring it back to very sort of prosaic terms, we're just talking about joining everything up digitally, aren't we? Data, phone calls, video calls, passing of documents, passing of signatures. We're just talking about, I guess, what Facebook is thinking about is, look, we can be the organization that knits it all together, whether you're walking around with a face thingy or not. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. Oh my God, we're almost at 10 minutes. I'll just open this up to the audience. If there's any particular questions you would like to ask us, please fire away. Now is the time. We're going to keep talking. As questions come in, I will try and address them. We'll go very, 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 very quickly. Okay. Here's a good question. Close to my heart. Okay, maybe to Emma. Isabel, do you think it is better to have legal tech providers that are point solutions, effectively?
Oh,
Well, I think this is Tobias's question, who is one of the leaders of legal tech. So I think that he was saying, do you think that we are on the edge where potential clients of legal tech solutions
will not be bought only by the legal providers on more neutral grounds? Don't fully understand that, Tobias. You might have to rephrase it a bit. I'm not following that.
You're back, Richard.
Richard's back.
Zuckerberg was sitting there with his
He heard you.
And he just
Facebook always hears you. That's why I'm going to get an advert shortly for HP or something.
but the question was, but it's an old debate, but it's an oldie but a goodie. Point solution versus platform. What would you rather go for? Mega platform like Terra that now owns 75.8% of all legal tech companies on the planet, or would you like to go for a whole bunch of point solutions? What's your preference?
I'd have both. I'd have a platform that delivers microservices and deliver microservices through it. So small point solutions, but knitted together through one platform. That's what I would do.
So not all integrated, but you mean like a Rain and Court type thing? You mean, or
sort of like that, but just any sort of platform that gives interoperability to each of your different solutions and sort of surfaces them at the time that you need them, so that you can use them. So very user friendly. So you're not going in and out of so one single sign on, one place to go. Access to many, a bit like an app store.
Well, I suppose you could say like Loople, I suppose, in some ways. He's trying to do that in some ways, but they've got more of a collaboration type aspect as well. But Emma, what do you think?
I'd agree with Isabel. You just said it there. An app store would be ideal, really. Obviously, mergers and things. There's always going to be the big ones that you sort of do get tied to. But I do quite like going to find sort of new technology companies and getting in there early before they're. So it's kind of both, really. I think there's always going to be a place for both as well.
Well, and also, you could argue, an artificial lawyer wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this mass of new point solutions. And the reason why all the point solutions came into being is because the great giants of legal tech, Wolters Kluwer, Thomson Reuters, LexisNexis, and so forth, who are now doing great work and were getting a little bit complacent, a little bit sleepy on certain things. And you know, the people had taken their eye off the ball, and there were both things that weren't being covered by the large platforms, and there were also lots of spaces opening up which they could have filled very easily. They had huge resources. They could have seen it coming and just, you know, figured it out, but they didn't. Now it's interesting. The market now is just so much more complex and interesting. But let's move on. Here's actually a nice handy question for some people in the audience who live in countries where legal tech is still relatively new and the clients are really definitely new to it. The question is, so how do you explain to your client who has no knowledge about technology what legal tech is all about and how you can help them? So think of perhaps a jurisdiction where the clients don't know much about tech, aren't that interested perhaps, but you believe there's probably some advantage to you. How do you go about getting this going?
Well, don't explain it, just deliver better and charge the right amount, and everyone's happy. There's no need to sit. If you have to sit down and explain your legal technology, you're doing something wrong, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We're doing quite a lot of work worldwide as well. And sometimes the only thing to do is to actually do it in real life examples. And as Isabel said, you know, it's if you have to explain it, then it's kind of a bit wrong.
Interesting. Okay, here's another sort of broader question. I have to keep it very, 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 very brief because in a couple of seconds we're going to do the big predictions. But this is a sort of pro bono-y sort of justice tech type question. What are your thoughts about the development of legal tech for people who are unlawyered, so i.e. people who can't afford lawyers, which in fact, even in the UK, which is a very developed country, I would probably say about 70% of people after about £2,000 or £3,000 would effectively be, oh my God, I can't afford any more of this. So beyond a bit of property conveyancing, there's not a lot the vast majority of people, even in a very developed country, could do. Any quick thoughts on that?
Well, given that more people have access to a phone than sanitation in the world, and that's a genuine true fact, I think I'm all for it. Obviously, the means are there for solutions to be delivered, and law firms and others should be devoting their time, their pro bono time, to helping people that don't have representation. It's a no-brainer.
Can legal tech solve the problem though, or are we barking up the wrong?
It depends what problem it is, doesn't it? Really.
Well, they're often very complex, dispute-related problems. Very often, aren't they? For example, bizarrely, I've got a friend in the US who is thinking about getting divorced, and he went to a lawyer, and he's actually got a very good job. You know, he's not super well paid, but you know, okay. And the lawyer turned around and basically said, "You can't afford to get divorced."
Yeah. If you look at sort of do not pay, is that Joshua Browder's things? It called
yeah.
There
You couldn't really get divorced on that, could you?
For certain areas that are not too complex, absolutely, that's a no-brainer from my perspective.
Now, Hugo Legal. There's another one that's kind of doing this bot beginning. And then the idea is that you just drive down the legal cost.
All right. Okay. So to the audience member who asked that, go and have a look at Do Not Pay. That might help. That might give some inspiration. We're running out. We've really run out of time. So we're going to the grand finale, which is, what is your big prediction? So these are concrete predictions. So X is going to happen to Y or something like. And let's go back to Emma. We'll work around. So what do you think?
Oh, crikey.
anything that's got a smidgen of a chance of happening.
I think there'll be more and more low code, well integrated platforms. There's already quite a lot, but I think there's going to be a lot more in the next 12 months.
Safe. That's a safe one. That's a safe one.
There you go.
I'm going to say something we talked about at the beginning, actually, which is that Microsoft are going to enter the market and try and create everything for everybody
in the legal sector. You think Microsoft is going to go full on?
I know that Google have already made some investments. We're working with a couple of them already. So I think Microsoft have some amazing tools that are already adopted within law firms, and for them to integrate some of those and turn into a enormous legal tech provider.
Interesting. Well, of course, I mean, you know, as we all know, the legal world lives on top of and within Microsoft. In fact, I was talking to a legal tech consultant before Christmas, and I was asking him, what tech tools and stuff do you use, to create, things for your clients. He says basically we just use Microsoft in all its various aspects. And I said it gives us so much that we can do for our clients that we rarely ever get out of Microsoft and all of its various things, which is interesting. Last but not least, and then I'll throw in another.
Okay.
Isabel.
Specifics: January 20th, 2023. This will be hosted not by Cosmos, but on the metaverse by Meta. We will all meet again in the metaverse.
All right.
You heard it here first.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Okay. My one, actually, I'm actually going to borrow it from Kerry Westland at Aldershot Goddard, who I asked a bunch of people for predictions before Christmas, and she said it kind of jokingly, but she said that a legal tech company will buy a law firm. And I take a slightly different slant on that, and I'd say that a legal tech company will buy an ALSP. And there's actually good precedent for that already, because Thomson Reuters bought Pangaea 3, right, many years ago, before it then decided strategically to get rid of it and sell it to EY. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. If you look at the money coming into the market, $150 million to Ironclad a couple of days ago, huge quantities of money. You've got companies doing IPOs and generating huge flows of capital. They could easily, probably not the largest ALSPs and law companies, probably off the market, but I could certainly see some of the smaller and mid-sized ones. And it helps you to then marry that services and the tech together. And I think I don't know if it will happen, but I think it's certainly possible in a way that perhaps wouldn't have been in the past. So
that's a good prediction. I think that could happen.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I predict, my final prediction is that this webinar is going to come to an end very shortly. That's almost certain.
I thought you were going to say that Nick was going to be able to dial in, but
yeah, by the way, for people who are part of the Nick Watson fan club, as we are, he is in Mexico at the moment. He's working from Mexico, which is WFM. Apparently, and I'm not sure what happens. Maybe he's been kidnapped by a drug cartel. We're not quite sure, but anyway, he can't be with us today. But hopefully, he'll be with us next year at the Metaverse if he gets back from Mexico in one piece. So wishing you well, Nick. Thank you to Cosmonauts for laying on all the tech to allow us to do this, and thank you very much to all the audience. And last but not least, thank you very much to our super panel, Emma, John, and Isabel. And hope to see you, if not next year, then before then. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Well, we're now logging off. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.